Today is International Youth Day. It's a day set aside by the global community to celebrate and raise voices against any injustice or discrimination happening in the world with the youth. Now, this celebration becomes imperative due to a very large amount of young persons in the world struggling with issues related to physical or mental health, as well as education and employment. The day is often marked with concerts, workshops, as well as cultural events and meetings involving national, local government officials and youth organizations. The theme for this year's celebration is Intergenerational Solidarity, creating a world for all ages. Now, we bring in to shed more light on the essence of this year's celebration of International Youth Day, the CEO of Leeds Network, Chukwuma Okenwa. Thank you very much for joining in. So for you as a Nigerian youth, what's the significance of today's celebration?
It is set aside by the United Nations or the world or the international community, if you will, to reflect on issues affecting young persons. And the essence of such days actually advocate on how we can create safe spaces for more young persons to get involved politically, socially, and otherwise. Interesting thing about this year's advocacy is that it is centered on ensuring that all ages, without discrimination, are co-opted in the collective action to actualizing the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030. Because the fact remains that if we are thinking about like building a better world for all ages, certainly one group cannot suffice to achieve all of that. We need all of the relevant stakeholders. The children, they have a role to play. The youths, they have a role to play. The adults, they have a role to play. But one of the major things that the UN want to strike in this year's conversation is how there can be that bridge, intergenerational solidarity. Because oftentimes there is a generation gap. You see instances of ageism, like someone being discriminated for nothing else except from the fact that the person is young. Yes, you could be capable, but the problem could be that you are young, so they believe that youthfulness is associated with rascality. And then you see the aged, instead of them mentoring young persons, some skills, experiences are lost, even in terms of innovation, because there is that intergenerational gap, and that's what this year's International Youth Day seeks to bridge.
And talking about intergenerational solidarity, that the forthcoming election appears to be a fine moment for us to see some of that in display. What's your assessment of the level of youth participation in politics and governance, even as we move nearer to the election season?
I would say it's impressive, just like we know that recently when INEC opened up the portal again for continuous voter registration, there was massive turnout of young persons. Unlike ever before, young persons want to be part of the decision process. And we also want to believe that that should also translate to not only voting the candidates of their choice, but also learning to be part of the process by engaging elected officers, letting them understand their needs, their challenges, and anticipating they should be able to make the needed interventions. Because governance is all about people, and our leaders are always encouraged to do a sort of needed assessment. You don't just assume you understand the challenges of young persons. There should be need assessment, and then the citizens on their own should be ready to engage. Even if the leaders consult you or not, you should be able to engage, and with that we can strengthen our governance processes and structures.
And of course, we are very mindful of the 2020 NSAS protest that was, of course, that many youth involved in. And sadly, we saw how it all ended. If we could draw lessons from happenings of the time as we move forward now, calling for more youth to talk more about governance, to proffer solutions, and join in nation building. How do we, balance the very active role, the very active roles that youth have to play in Nigeria?
Every young person that is conscious of the moment and every Nigeria that truly have this country at heart understand that our greatest need at this point is to de-escalate. The nation is already tensed up. You have lots of divisive voices, here and there. But I think it's really a clarion call to all Nigerians to become that voice advocating for national unity and cohesion, advocating for peace and security, advocating that everyone do the right thing and do not explore maybe things like violence as an option. But we should be able to talk about issues, we should be able to engage issues, explore the option of dialogue. Because the interesting thing is that diplomacy achieves for nations what they would have ordinarily, militarily explored as other options. So I think young persons are enjoined to explore the option of diplomacy, which is all about dialogue, engagement, communication, and with that, everything will be fine.
Yeah, right. And finally, talking about curbing barriers against more active participation in politics and governance by the youth, what's the way out?
I think the way out, which is very important, is young persons also must learn to stand behind fellow young persons, especially when they are getting it right. And by that I mean, yes, in Nigeria at the moment, whether in state house of assemblies and the National Assembly, we have young persons. So those young persons that are out there must become good advocates and should be able to, first of all, hold those that belong to their constituency responsible first. We should be able to call it all the woodies while we've been advocating for more participation of young persons. And it shouldn't be that when opportunity presents itself through engagement, through negotiation, we just let the opportunities falter. And it's almost like authenticating the fears that some of our elders have, that young persons cannot be trusted with power. So young persons must show capacity and demonstrate to the nation and the world that to be young actually means to be strong, to be formidable, and to be innovative.
All
And with
right.
that, right from our community, local government, we can transform Nigeria.
All right, CEO, Leeds Network, Chukwuma Okenwa, we thank you very much for your contributions on TVC News.
Yeah, thank you.